Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to this special edition of the Grey Pound for the magazine. Today I'm joined by Ian Eggleton, Director of Building and Access Consultancy at Evans Jones. Thanks ever so much for joining us, Ian. Now, we have an ageing population. How does this fit into the access of buildings compliance for Evans Jones?
Oh, thanks, Mark. I think we've got a serious challenge on our hands here. The baby boomers are coming through. They now make up 15% of the population of the UK, and over the next 20 years, that's only likely to increase. It's an unfortunate fact of life for everyone that the incidence of disability increases with age. So unfortunately for those baby boomers listening, by the time we get to 80, around 60% of us will have some form of disability. How does this fit in with us? So I'm an access consultant. I head up our access consultancy division, and we help people make their buildings more accessible. So as you can imagine, the boomers now making up a large portion of the population. That will increase over the next 20 years. They've got huge spending power, around 320 billion a year of household spending. So firstly, there's an opportunity for businesses, make yourself accessible to disabled people, and there is money to be made. But as you alluded to, there is a compliance element to it as well. Since the Disability Discrimination Act in 1996, we've all had an obligation to eliminate discrimination against disabled people and to make reasonable adjustments to how we do business and to our premises, to ensure that we are open and accessible for disabled people. So at Evans Jones, as access consultants, going back to 1997, we started with helping HSBC look at a lot of their branches, up to about 180 of those. And since then, we've done about 8,000 what we call access audits. So an access audit is a survey of your building and could be of your business as a whole, looking at barriers to access for disabled people, and helping you to understand what your obligations are and what changes you might need to make. So yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about, and that's how we can help.
Now, a lot of people think that disability is just people in wheelchairs, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it? Especially if you're trying to plan a building or planning around a building or compliance around a building, because it's about a lot more than that, isn't it?
Yes, Mark. I mean, I guess, I train people to do this and talk to businesses. And often I ask you, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about disability? And it tends to be, the wheelchair symbol often is what comes to mind. There's about 13 million disabled people in the UK at the moment. Of those, about 1.2 million are wheelchair users. And of those wheelchair users, only around half use a wheelchair all of the time. So a lot of those users will actually be able to get out their chair and move around their home, or maybe move around a small shop, something like that. Whereas there are around, I now need to look at about 11 million users with some form of hearing loss, 2 million users with a visual impairment, 850,000 people with some form of dementia. That's unfortunately going to increase over the next 20 years significantly, I'd suggest. So no, it's not all about wheelchair users. So often businesses look at this and think, oh, I might need to install a ramp or a lift. Whereas we'll look at a building for everyone. So we'll be coming through the building, as an example. If I'm visually impaired, that doesn't mean I'm completely blind. Most visually impaired users have some residual vision. So we'll be looking at how well your building is lit, how well contrasted key features like doors are, step edges, because that's, that all comes into the mix of what's likely to be reasonable for you to do. So we talked earlier about what might an adjustment look like. And often people think about ramps, widened doors, lifts. It's what's reasonable for you. And that relates to the size of your business often. So what might be reasonable for HSBC or another high street bank making a substantial profit may well not be reasonable for someone in a similar premises just down the street. Maybe someone who's running a convenience store, corner shop. So they might have exactly the same problem, and it might be reasonable for the high street bank to spend a lot of money on a ramp to get into the building. whereas the adjustment for the convenience store or high street shop may be something as simple as a call point at the door and serving someone from the door. So yeah, that's the kind of examples and the way we approach things.
So I would assume that you get involved at the very start of a building process as well, and work closely with building contractors and big building companies to make sure that they're compliant, make sure that the buildings are done correctly at the very start.
Yeah, certainly, particularly on larger projects, we're often form part of the design team. So we will be there reviewing plans from the start, looking at the key challenges of the site, and then taking the site all the way through from initial inception through to delivery on site, to try and make sure that the building is accessible as possible to everyone. And often, I think most contractors, larger contractors and design teams have a reasonably good understanding of access for wheelchair users these days, reasonably good, but perhaps they don't, there isn't the knowledge there to look at how you make a dementia-friendly environment, for instance, or how you might pick your colour scheme to make your building as accessible as possible to visually impaired users. So that's where I think we can certainly add some value. Equally, we do get involved in large projects which involve the redevelopment, say, of historic or listed buildings. So it's not something completely new. Clearly, if it's completely new, we start from scratch. It should be relatively easy to make something which is, achieves equal access for all. In an historic building setting, it's typically a lot more challenging. We might have conservation issues to balance against accessibility requirements. So again, we can help there.
Now, well, I always think about the Premier Inn I stayed in recently, in Tenby, and they didn't have many rooms left. So they said, "Look, we've got the disability room left. Would you stay there?" And I must admit, I kind of felt guilty, but we're driven all the way to Tenby, and the room had got changed. And I said, as long as nobody else wants that room, anyway, I don't want to make myself an excuse. But we slept there in the disability, and there were lots of things. The bed was lower. The buttons on the wall, the light in the slide door, the tap. I mean, there was I laid there in bed thinking, God, there's so much work that's gone into this now. And I think maybe a lot more people are aware of it. And maybe, companies like yours are leading it. But what's going to be the big issue in the next 20 years? What do you think is going to come out of it all? Is there something that go, oh, yes, it's going to be this?
Well, I think it's often led by, so something that will be topical, which started a few years ago, is changing places. There's a government initiative coming out shortly, which will allow local authorities to apply for a pot of cash up to £30 million, I believe, to install a change in place. A change in place is, easiest way to describe it, is a larger accessible toilet, which includes changing facilities. So let's say someone has complex needs. So they might need some bathing and help changing when they're toileting. This enables that. And it can make a difference between someone being, let's say it's in a town centre. I would typically be there for half an hour shopping, but I know lots of people will be there for 3 or 4 hours shopping. It could make the difference between someone being able to come to that town centre or not. Perhaps unlike you and I, disabled people might spend some time actually researching and planning their visit. If they know a change in place is there, then that could make the difference between them coming there or not. Would equally apply to larger public buildings. Looking a bit further to the future, with the boomers coming through over the next 20 years, dementia is, on the increase. And as I say, as you get older, likelihood of you getting dementia increases exponentially. So I could see more design around dementia-friendly environments, which is often, again, looking at lighting, colour and contrast, and some quite interesting uses of that, just to make those public buildings more friendly for users with dementia. Equally, there is a piece at the moment around neurodiversity and looking at more autism-friendly environments as well. So I think there is some imminent guidance out there. Well, there's some burgeoning guidance out there already, and that is likely to filter its way through into guidance. And also, I guess finally, I'm afraid, unless Boris turns the tide of obesity as he's promised to do, We are already the most, incidence of obesity in the UK is already the highest in Europe. What's the impact on buildings? Well, particularly in a healthcare setting, it does mean things have to be larger. So the simple fact of the matter is, if you have a morbidly obese patient coming to your clinic who perhaps is using a bariatric wheelchair, a very large wheelchair, the current guidance, those patients simply won't get through the door. So I think if we continue on the trend we are, then I think that is likely to filter through into mainstream guidance as well.
So do you agree then that they should actually be manufacturing bigger chairs in cinemas, bigger chairs in planes, wider doors, or should it actually be that we say no, you've got to lose a bit of weight? Or is that?
Well, I'll stick in my world, Mark, where it's about making reasonable adjustments. And I think, we are auditing against standards. Those standards make some provision. The standards out there don't really make provision for that at the moment, but I think they will change. Certainly, it's for us, it's about context. So if we are looking at a healthcare setting and having audited quite a few hospitals, if you go to the diabetic department and talk to the staff there, they will tell you that their patients will typically visit most other departments in the hospital. Unfortunately, the nature of type 2 diabetes is that it does come with a lot of complications. So you follow that through and think, well, we shouldn't just be designing this department for larger users. We should be designing every department. So when we're looking at primary care settings, so doctor surgeries, and then going into, say, larger clinics and then into hospitals, we would certainly be promoting looking at, putting it very simply, larger door openings everywhere, rather than just being specific.
I tell you what, Ian, we could talk forever on this. It's absolutely fascinating. Thanks ever so much for joining us today at Punchline Talks. And hopefully we won't be going there, needing this too long in the future. Anyway, look after yourself. Thanks ever so much for joining us today.
Okay, Mark, thanks very much.